Direct from our newsroom in Washington, in color, this is the CBS Evening News with Roger Mudd and Bert Quint in Amman, Ike Pappas in Amman, Bob Simon in London, Marvin Kalb in Washington, Bill Walker in New York, Barry Seraphin in Norfolk, Bruce Morton in San Diego, and a sports report from Haywood Hale Broun in Forest Hills, New York.
Good evening. Arab guerrillas today blew up 3 hijacked airliners in the Jordanian desert north of Amman. 3 jets worth $25 million. All the passengers had been taken off before the dynamiting, some at the last moment. As a result, a split developed tonight in the Arab guerrilla movement, which could affect the remaining hostages. The Central Committee of the Palestine Liberation Movement announced it is suspending the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, which carried out the hijacking. It also said it would no longer cooperate with the front. Suspension is one step short of expulsion. Later, the International Red Cross said it has broken off negotiations with the Palestine liberation officials. It did not give any reason. Earlier, the front said it would free all the hostages except for 40 Israelis, Americans, British, Swiss, and Germans. 5 of the 40 are Israeli women. The guerrillas said they will hold the 40 as ransom for the release of 7 Arabs imprisoned in Europe and an unspecified number in Israel. But it's still not clear what will happen to about 260 hostages still in Amman. Britain today broke its silence and announced it is willing to release its guerrilla prisoner, Laila Khalid, as part of a satisfactory agreement for freeing all the passengers and crew. Miss Khalid was seized last Sunday in a futile attempt to hijack an El Al airliner. 128 of the passengers have now been flown out of Amman. Some have gone to London, some to Zurich from Cyprus, some are arriving in New York this evening. We have a satellite report beginning with Bert Quint in Amman.
The fact that the ordeal for some was ending and that the prospects of many others getting out alive were brighter was the result of a change in guerrilla management of the affair. From control by the Maoist, ultra-fanatical Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, which carried out the hijackings, to control by the Guerrilla Council that oversees the front and 10 other guerrilla groups. Your passport, man? The first hint of the change came when the women and children and the ill men who had been permitted to come into Amman from the desert airstrip earlier this week were called into a meeting with Red Cross officials and members of the front. Some, but not all, were given back their passports. CBS News correspondent Ike Pappas was with them.
You got your passport back?
Yes, I did.
What did the Jordanians tell you about why they gave you your passport?
They didn't say why. They just said that they were giving back some passports and that we would all get them. But they had some of them now, and the rest would get them later.
Do you feel any resentment at all?
We were treated very well, but it's like a nightmare. It's unbelievable. Something that happens to somebody else.
Did you at any time feel that you might be placed aboard that plane and perish in it?
Yes, I did. But they assured us we wouldn't, but you worry.
They told you that you would not?
They said you will be all right. They assured us you will be all right. We do not want to hurt you, and we like you. We like you as Americans.
Miss Simmons, you got your passport back?
Yes, I have.
What did they tell you?
Well, they just apologize for the inconvenience they have caused us, and they hope that they'll be able to release all as soon as possible. And that was all.
What about your feelings now? There's a possibility, a very good one, that you're freed.
You know, I'd rather have everybody be free. I don't want to be among the few.
The Popular Front did not seem pleased to have the negotiating power taken from them by the Central Committee. It seemed to be debating whether or not to fight the decision. If it does, that will add more tension and strife to a situation already overflowing with it. The ceasefire between the guerrilla organizations and Jordan's army is a tenuous one. There's still some shooting, and the guerrillas keep making tougher demands on King Hussein. Right now, the government and the guerrillas each seem to have its own turf. The guerrillas are inside the capital and the army outside. But the guerrillas are insisting that the army not only stay outside the cities, but away from them, at the front, to fight the Israelis, thus to abdicate any control over the country. Bert Quint, CBS News, Amman.
Some of the passengers were flown from Nicosia to Zurich. Others continued on to London, where a stewardess from the hijacked VC-10 was asked by newsmen when she first learned that the 3 aircraft had been blown up.
Well, today, while we were coming to London.
Did you really believe that they would carry out their threats?
No, because they seemed very pleasant, and they said they wouldn't harm us, so I just didn't think about it.
But how determined did the guerrillas seem to you?
Well, the only time they seemed terribly determined was before landing into Beirut, when they wanted to refuel, and they said that unless we sit down and not move, they would blow us all up. And he had a briefcase in which he said there was a bomb. So, we all had to keep quiet because we didn't want to get blown up.
But that really was the only time when you thought you might get blown up?
Well, yes, I guess so. Because later on, once we landed at the Revolutionary Airport, they were very nice to us. They got us water, they got the Red Cross doctor, and they got us drinks.
What was the very first thing you knew about the hijacking?
Well, when the air stewardess from the first-class galley came out to us, and she came to me and said, "Don't go into the cabin with that tray because we're being hijacked."
And new fighting was reported today in Amman between Arab guerrillas and Jordanian soldiers. 2 days ago, they had agreed to a ceasefire.
Whatever happened to Esther Williams? Remember the swimming champion who learned to swim pretty for the movies? Well, today, Esther's still swimming.
But now just for me. Sometimes with my daughter, Susie. When you have teenagers to keep track of the years for you, you begin thinking about living a little smarter. Stay on the young side. Smarter living means sensible exercise, sensible eating, starting with breakfast. And we like Kellogg's Product 19 because it has 100% of the minimum daily adult requirements for vitamins and iron. Don't forget, Mom, it tastes delicious. Want to get back on the young side? We'll start with delicious Kellogg's Product 19. Mom, what year did you win the Nationals? Wasn't that in eat your cereal, dear.
The British and Swiss governments met in emergency session today, and Swiss Chancellor Karl Huber said the Western nations are unified in demanding the release of all hijacked hostages, regardless of nationality. At the moment, the U.S. government is not saying anything about today's events. Marvin Kalb reports.
The administration decided today that a show of quiet diplomacy makes much more sense than a cry of moral outrage. Therefore, no public comment of any kind on the dynamiting of the planes, the split in guerrilla ranks, or the hijackers' stubborn refusal to release all of the passengers.
The focus of diplomatic activity is in Amman, but much of the effort originates here in these busy, unpretentious offices at the State Department. The task force on the hijacking crisis functioning on a 24-hour basis for the past week. Dispatches, cables suggesting the high speed and confusion of the hour. On Capitol Hill today, Secretary Rogers seemed sympathetic to a new Israeli request for credits for military hardware, linking America's interest with Israel's.
President Nixon on several occasions has made that quite clear, that we do recognize that our national interest is served, and because of our national policy, we have an obligation to assist Israel and to support it and to be sure that its independence and sovereignty are continued.
The administration is expected to reach a final decision on the Israeli request, which could run into hundreds of millions of dollars, late next week, timed, it seems, for the arrival here of Israeli Premier Golda Meir. Marvin Kalb, CBS News, the State Department.
If you boarded a plane today, the person sitting next to you may have been an insurance salesman from Oklahoma City, or he may have been a sky cop, the latest step to deter hijackers. Bill Walker reports from New York.
For the average passenger boarding Pan Am's Flight 100 for London and Frankfurt, today was like almost any other. Only after the usual wait to check in did the visible elements of stepped-up security become apparent. Airline security and federal agents examined each package and carry-on bag. And as each person boarded the giant 747, he was scrutinized by a now common electronic device designed to detect metal objects such as weapons before a would-be hijacker can board an aircraft. But the sternest measure so far was not so apparent. In this crowd of more than 200 passengers were at least 2 federal agents, dressed as average passengers but armed with pistols. Airline and federal officials have forbidden identification of the new sky cops, but a CBS newsman who saw some of the agents who attended special crash training courses Friday identified 2 of them among today's passengers. Despite the new security checks, Flight 100 pulled away from its gates only 40 minutes behind schedule. Bill Walker, CBS News, Kennedy International Airport.
great dinner party, eh, hon?
Oh, yes, honey, but I do have to correct you on one thing.
I used the wrong fork?
No.
I ate somebody else's salad.
No, it was your grammar.
My grammar?
Yes. You told Alice.
What did I tell Alice? What?
Well, you said to Alice that Winston tastes good, like a cigarette should, and that's bad grammar.
Honey, I was telling Alice about Winston Super King.
But you should pay more attention to your grammar.
Hon, what do you want, good grammar or good taste?
I want you to stop talking to Alice.
Pardon our grammar, but Winston tastes good like a cigarette should.
Where did Winston Super King get its bad grammar? Same place it got its great taste. Winston King.
Honey, is Alice prettier than me?
Prettier than I.
Vice President Agnew said today the world community cannot succumb to acts of piracy and blackmail such as the destruction of hijacked airliners by Palestinian commandos. Earlier, campaigning in California, the vice president broadened his attack on radical liberal congressmen to include at least one member of his own party. An Agnew speechwriter told reporters the attack was meant to include Republican Senator Charles Goodell of New York, who is up for re-election, although the vice president will not mention Goodell by name. Bruce Morton reports from San Diego.
Vice President Agnew's target for tonight, as he put it, was the professional pessimist. Most of those, the vice president explained at a rally for California Republicans, are Democrats. The speech included specific references to Senator Joseph Montoya of New Mexico and Democratic National Chairman Lawrence O'Brien. And it was all the kind of rhetoric Republican crowds have been enjoying on this tour.
In the United States today, we have more than our share of the nattering nabobs of negativism. The professional pessimists have been wrong about inflation, they've been wrong about recession, wrong about Vietnamization, wrong about disorder, wrong about arms control, wrong about crime, wrong about the strength of the American character. And some of these wrongos have the colossal gall to ask you to elect them again. I think that the men who sold America short will not be around for long.
The vice president struck an unusually cheery note here. He found progress in the economy, progress against crime. But two things are worth pointing out. The vice president said that the rate of unemployment now was lower than it had been during the halcyon Kennedy-Johnson years, yet in fact it is higher now than at any time since 1964. And Mr. Agnew said that the professional pessimists alone are predicting trouble on the campuses this fall. In fact, the vice president, in a private conversation less than a month ago, predicted a tent offensive on the campuses this autumn. Apparently, the professional pessimists accept short-term members as readily as anybody else. Bruce Morton, CBS News, San Diego.
Michigan Senator Philip Hart says he plans to introduce legislation Monday to establish so-called no-fault car insurance, which would pay claims without a court determination of which driver was at fault. Hart says this would clear court dockets and enable faster reimbursement of claims. Many southern schools were desegregated this month, but the fight on the issue is far from over. In Norfolk, Virginia today, a group opposed to forced busing called the Unified Concerned Citizens of America held a strategy meeting. Barry Seraphin reports.
About 75 parents and teachers, mostly from southern states, came this weekend to swap stories of hardship under court-imposed busing orders and map a plan of battle against federal intervention and racial balance formulas in the schools. The group insists it is not against integration, only forced busing as a means of achieving it. It claims a membership of more than 1 million people. Today there were telegrams of support from South Carolina Senator Strom Thurmond, Georgia Governor Lester Maddox, and Florida Governor Claude Kirk. A lawyer from Florida won quick acceptance of a suggestion for the date the Supreme Court will consider anti-busing arguments in a key North Carolina case.
I ask this organization to seriously consider adopting a resolution or putting out the word that October the 12th should be a national day of concern, where every student every parent, every teacher, and every administrator in the public school system in the United States, instead of attending school that day, attend his house of worship, so that we can all pray and meditate that the Supreme Court returns a just and fair decision for all of us.
According to some surveys, there is actually less busing now than before court orders for school districts went into effect. And a former HEW official says more busing is still employed for segregation than for desegregation. The birth now of groups such as this coalition indicates the issue is not just one of disruption of school patterns, but also who decides to bus students and why. Barry Seraphin, CBS News, Norfolk, Virginia.
Wonder asks, how big do you want to be?
Big enough to wear my daddy's shoes. We're gonna have to see the parade. Big enough to ride a two-wheeler.
She'll never need Wonder Bread more than right now, because the time to grow bigger and stronger is during the Wonder years, ages 1 through 12, the years when your child grows to 90% of her adult height. How can you help? By serving nutritious Wonder-enriched bread. Wonder helps build strong bodies 12 ways. Each delicious slice of Wonder Bread supplies protein for muscle, minerals for strong bones and teeth, carbohydrates for energy, vitamins for nerves, all vital elements for growing minds and bodies. During the Wonder years, the growth years, help your child grow bigger and stronger. Serve Wonder Bread. Wonder helps build strong bodies 12 ways.
Hurricane Ella struck land today, a thinly populated area of Mexico, and missed the United States by a wide margin. In Mexico, Ella destroyed a number of houses and flooded villages, but there were no immediate reports of casualties. A series of earthquakes today shook a large area of Southern California. The quakes broke some windows, caused some power failures, and swayed tall buildings in Los Angeles and San Diego. There was no major damage, but an explosion at a riverside factory slightly injured 4 workers. Today was a day of civic mourning in Venice, where a tornado yesterday killed about 35 persons, 2 of them American tourists, and smashed a crowded passenger boat. Bob Simon in London describes the scene.
The tornado ripped through Venice at 125 miles an hour, leaving at least 35 dead and 200 injured. It was at its most lethal on the lagoon, where it struck a water bus crowded with tourists and Italian workers. According to an eyewitness, the 25-ton motorboat was lifted into the air like a feather and spun around several times. Then it plunged back into the water upside down and sank. There was no screaming or shouting. No one had time to realize what had happened. All night, skin divers dragged bodies from the muddy waters. There were believed to be between 60 and 70 people on board when the tornado hit. 30 people survived. Most of them had been on the deck. So far, 19 bodies have been found. The search is still going on. On dry land, the tornado claimed at least another 13 lives as it swept in from the sea and in 30 seconds cut a mile-wide corridor of destruction. It whipped through several camping sites on the outskirts of the city. Cars, caravans, and tents were picked up and hurled several yards before being smashed to the ground. The sites resembled the aftermath of heavy bombing raids. Pope Paul has sent a message of condolence to the Catholic Patriarch of Venice, and a day of civic mourning has been declared. Bob Simon, CBS News, reporting.
South Vietnamese Vice President Key disclosed today he will follow his plan to speak at a victory rally in Washington on October 3rd. U.S. officials fear Key's appearance may provoke anti-war demonstrations, and Key has been under pressure to cancel the trip. On the way back from Washington, Key plans to stop in Paris, where he is nominally in charge of his country's delegation to the Vietnam peace talks. In the Vietnam War, action remained relatively light today. Senate testimony made public today reveals the United States between 1964 and 1969 paid South Korea about $1 billion for providing combat troops to South Vietnam. The funds included extra combat pay, occasionally 20 times the normal rate for South Korean soldiers, and contracts with South Korean businessmen for war materials. Foreign Relations Committee Chairman Fulbright charged South Korea was making a profit on the war. Reports from Moscow today say author Yuli Daniel has been released from jail in the Soviet Union. The Russian writer spent 5 years in prison for allegedly slandering the Soviet state in writings published abroad. Friends of Daniel said they believed he was given his freedom to live in quiet exile with an understanding he would not act like a returning martyr. The Soviet Union today launched its first moonshot in more than a year. TASS, the Soviet news agency, indicated the unmanned spacecraft, Luna 16, would orbit the moon, not make a lunar landing.
I'm Sid Charisse. Now, I'm not going to tell you my age because I don't look it. You know, the best way not to look your age is to do something about it. I do. I take good care of myself. I exercise, I try and eat the right foods, get plenty of rest, and to be sure that I got enough iron and vitamins, I take a Geritol tablet every day. Geritol. I think it's one of the nicest things a girl can do for herself.
You heard what she said.
Geritol. Every day. 11:10 p.m. Can't sleep. 11:30. Wide awake. 11:45. Still awake. When you take more than 15 minutes to fall asleep and feel you need help, take Somonex as directed for 100% safe sleep. Somonex is the only leading sleep aid with 3 medical ingredients to quickly relax you and help you get to sleep. When you take more than 15 minutes to fall asleep, take Somonex and sleep, sleep, sleep.
It was Australia Day at the U.S. Tennis Open at Forest Hills today. Margaret Court and Judy Dalton won the ladies' doubles championships, and fellow Aussies Ken Rosewall and Tony Roche took men's singles semifinal matches. More than anything, the 1970 championships will be noted as the year of the red flag, as Haywood Hale-Broon reports.
Tennis is moving away from its cozy crumpets on the terrace image as fast as one of Pancho Gonzalez's serves, and nothing personifies its new dashing deadliness better than the red flag, symbol that someone's dream of glory has minutes or possibly seconds to live.
Sets, which have run as long as 96 games, as opponents strove for the necessary 2-game margin, now fall over the cliff at 13, as at 6 games apiece, the whole duel compacts into the lethal lunges of 5 points out of 9. Spectators are apprised of the nearness of the kill by the raising of the flag, and players are apprised of it by a tightening of the stomach muscles. This week, ganglia-twangling tiebreakers nibbled at the cool of old champions like Bobby Riggs, as imperturbable as any of the major players, and Pancho Segura, who seems ageless, if not nerveless. The loss of 2 tiebreaker sets put Davis Cup hero Arthur Ashe out of the tournament at the quarterfinal level. And the loss of 1 put Rod Laver, believed by many to be the world's best player, out in the round of 16. Laver felt like a fighter who slipped on a wet patch just as the punch started.
Now that this type of entertainment, as you might want to put it now, with the tiebreakers here at Forest Hills, it's the depth of the competitors at the level of competition that it is. It's an extremely tough tournament to win, and well, I think a tiebreaker is a good idea. But then again, I think a tiebreaker on grass is completely unfair. I've played one against Dennis Ralston that I played one little volley that wasn't quite correct, and that meant I lost the set. I find that I get more aggravated on a grass court now, I think, than I've ever been. I don't think it's a case of getting old or stale or whatever. It's just a case of you hit 2 bad bounces and a miss-hit forehand and you lose your serve. And it's a bit difficult.
Pancho Gonzalez, who has always treated the pastel gentilities of tennis with fiery disdain and opposed the game's establishment on many fronts, finds the tiebreaker hard on the composure but easy on the feet.
The new rules mean that the physical conditioning that has been such a great part of this game is now going to be, just taken away. So it's certainly going to favor the older fellows and the lesser conditioned players simply because they don't play as long. Shortens the matches. Apparently, I think, which is the most important, the crowds enjoy it because it reaches a climax if it gets to the tiebreaker of 9 points, and they get jumping out of their seats on nearly every point. So I suppose that when you can excite the crowd like that, it's good for the game.
You have been playing tennis for a great many years. Is there more to it than just the new rules? Is tennis a new game?
No, it's not a new game, only from the aspect there seems to be a lot lot more younger players.
The introduction of sudden death into a game of endurance is a frank effort to swell tennis crowds into something more than the hardcore of players hoping to learn something with which they can confound their friends in businessmen's doubles, beautiful people who enjoy the chance to chat with friends in fresh air, and people who couldn't get tickets for the baseball game. The growth of open tennis and interest in rewards more solid than the traditional amateur's privilege of a plane ticket to a place he's already at extends even to girls who used to concern themselves principally on whether to wear all white or a little discreet needlework around the hem. The needlework is still there on the Paris 1890 underpants, but the women who make the tour are planning a boycott of tournaments which short them on prize money. Players like Rosemary Casals feel that the reward ratio is unfair.
We feel that we expend the same amount of energy, and we've taken the same amount of time to produce the skill that we have in playing tennis, which is the same for the men. I feel we work just as hard for the money as they do, and feel that there should be some compensation for it.
What do you think women's tennis might do to make itself more glamorous or popular or crowd-pleasing, if anything?
Well, I really don't know. I think the women try and look their best. You know, a lot of them say, well, wear your frilly pants or perhaps even go braless or something like that. But I think most of the women are fairly attractive in their tennis gear, and I don't think they need to do that much more.
Superficially, tennis keeps its look of a prep school game where pushiness is on a par with appearing in a blue shirt. But the new concern for the box office means that participants are going to push for a cut instead of a cup, and that professionalism is going to extend to every corner of the club.
The spur which has sent tennis galloping into a new world is money. But money brings new problems, too. And now even the umpires, once paid in prestige, look at the gross figures and cough warningly. Gentlemen, are you ready? Play. This is Haywood Hale Brune in Forest Hills.
That's the news this Saturday night. Roger Mudd, CBS News, Washington.
To strengthen the youngster's grip, you get him a muscle toughener. To strengthen his teeth against cavities, you get him a tooth toughener. Colgate with MFP fluoride. That's the advanced fluoride, and only Colgate has it. It's accepted by the American Dental Association. It toughens tooth enamel so children can have fewer cavities. Colgate with MFP fluoride is the tooth toughener.
Lady, why the tracksuit?
Look, between housework and shopping, I walk 5 miles a day.
I must do twice that much.
Oh, well, do what I do. Yeah. Use Hour After Hour Double Dry, the long-distance deodorant with hexachlorophene. It's got a special formula that helps stop wetness and odor mile after mile. We both use it.
Lasts all day.
Hour After Hour, the long-distance deodorant, double dry or regular.
Direct from our newsroom in Washington, in color, this has been the CBS Evening News with Roger Mudd. The CBS Evening News is brought to you 7 nights a week in color, Monday through Friday with Walter Cronkite, and on Saturday and Sunday with Roger Mudd. Presidential Counselor Daniel P. Moynihan will be the guest tomorrow on Face the Nation. "60 Minutes premieres the new season with a look at Gershwin's Porgy and Bess, performed in Catfish Row, and a futuristic view of cable television, Tuesday night at 10, 9 Central Time on CBS.